one under 50, or perhaps older, pays homage to a Latina actress who has to pave the way for Latina stars of today, Salma Hayek, Michelle Rodriguez, Zoe Saldana. It is Puerto Rican, Rita Moreno, who is often mentioned, and rightly so. She is the first Hispanic woman to have won an Oscar for West Side Story. She is one of the earliest and one of the few to have earned a Grammy, Emmy, Tony, and Oscar, all within a 16-year time frame under the age of 50. Nonetheless, her star emerged in the 1950s. She was not the first Latina in Hollywood. 3 decades earlier, in the silent era, Dolores Del Rio and Lupe Velez paved the way for Moreno. Both were Mexicans of contrasting personas. They were the female counterparts of male Latin lovers, Rudolph Valentino and Ramon Navarro. Del Rio was an exotic, regal beauty, boasted by Marlene Dietrich as the most beautiful woman in Hollywood. Eventually, earning $9,000 a week, Dolores Del Rio starred in classics from the silent era with top billing, including Resurrection, Ramona, Evangeline, and What Price Glory. While a silent movie, What Price Glory was known for its use of profanity among its actors, deciphered by the deaf and lip readers. Dolores Del Rio's career continued to flourish in the talkies. Her successful film, Bird of Paradise, made before the Hays Code was enacted, created a scandal as she portrayed a scantily clad Polynesian who takes a nude swim. Her next film, Flying Down to Rio, was also a hit, introducing the world to the famous dancing pair, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Throughout the decade, she continued working, but none measured the success of her earlier efforts. So she returned to Mexico and gained more respect as an actress, with better roles in what is known as the golden age of Mexican cinema. In her personal life and on screen, Lupe Velez fit the fiery Hollywood Latina stereotype. She had a passionate affair with Gary Cooper and a stormy marriage to Olympian and movie Tarzan, Johnny Weissmuller. It was a volatile marriage known for yelling matches, bites, and scratches. In the late 1930s to early 40s, Velez had a successful series of comedic films aptly called the Mexican Spitfire series, built around her, and her nickname was even the Mexican Spitfire. But before switching to comedy, she began her career in dramatic silence, most notably The Gaucho in 1927 with Douglas Fairbanks. By the mid-1940s, her career suffered, partly due to ethnic stereotyping and personal problems. Finding herself pregnant and unmarried, she committed suicide in 1944 at the age of 36.
Side by side down the old fashioned way.
It isn't necessary to tie him up.
Almost 25 years after Velez's death, Estelita Rodriguez, known as the Cuban Fireball, was slated to portray Velez, but as Velez died at age 36, Estelita died at 37 before making the film. Rodriguez's Hollywood career began after Velez's death in the 1940s. She played mainly señorita types, most notably in Roy Rogers westerns at Republic Studios. And although Republic Pictures was a Poverty Row studio, not on the grand scale level of MGM, nor even a mid-tier studio as Columbia or Universal, it did allow her top billing in B Pictures. While not as famous as Dolores Del Rio or Lupe Velez, another Mexican, Raquel Torres, starred in a few classics in the 1920s until she married and retired in the mid-30s. She began in 1928 as the lead in the Oscar-winning silent White Shadows in the South, filmed on location in Tahiti, a rarity for its time. She had a supporting role in a silent part-talkie film, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, and her most famous talkie is the Marx Brothers Duck Soup. In the early talkie era, two Mexican actresses emerged who are still with us today. The first, Lupita Tovar, will turn 102 this year. Her most famous role is Eva in the Spanish Dracula, made at the same time as the Dracula starring Bela Lugosi. Now, in the early sound era, it was common for Hollywood to make foreign language films of their own, using foreign actors who mainly spoke French, Spanish, and German. She also starred in Mexico's first talkie, Santa. In Hollywood, she continued to make films until the 1940s. For those who are a bit younger, as I'm 100 years old in a younger body, her daughter, Susan Connor, was also an actress. She was nominated for an Academy Award as a Best Supporting Actress in Imitation of Life, but won the Golden Globe for the same film. And she also starred in Freud, The Gene Cooper Story, and To Hell and Back. Now, if you enjoyed last year's Oscar-nominated film, A Better Life, a story of a Mexican immigrant father and his son, it was directed by Chris Weitz, who has Mexican roots from his mom, Susan Connor, and his grandmother, Lupita Tovar. The other Mexican actress, who is still with us today, is a bit younger than Lupita, only 94, and her name is Movita. She's most remembered for her role as Fletcher Christian's Tahitian love interest in the 1935 version of Mutiny on the Bounty. Now, what's interesting is that later she married Marlon Brando, who played Fletcher Christian in the 1962 version. Now, Movita continued playing Latinas or Polynesians in the classics Flying Down to Rio, The Hurricane, and Fort Apache, but she worked on the screen throughout her lifetime, her final role being on the soap opera Knots Landing in the late 1980s. Oh, Margot is one of my favorite Mexican actresses. She debuted in the 1930s, starring in a number of classics from Winterset, Lost Horizon, and Viva Zapata in supporting roles. Now, I'm biased because I love flamenco, and Margot was a dancer. She had a role as a flamenco dancer in Val Lewton's horror flick, The Leopard Man. And what I also admire about Margot is her philanthropy. She helped found the Chicano nonprofit cultural center for the arts and education called Plaza de la Raza in East Los Angeles. It offers classes in theater, music, visual arts, and dance, including flamenco. Many of the performances are held at the Margot Albert Theater. Now, the name Albert comes from her second husband, Eddie Albert, the actor and environmental activist known for his role on Green Acres. I adore Dominican actress Maria Montez. She did not have the talent of the aforementioned actresses, but she brought me so much joy as a child. She was a moneymaker for Universal Studios during World War II, when fantasy films helped the audience forget about the war. I didn't grow up during World War II, but I did grow up with her on PBS channels in the 1980s. And most of them had blonde stars, like Betty Grable, Alice Faye, Sonia Henney. So it was really wonderful that Montez was a brunette like I am. She was beautiful and top-billed in colorful Arabian or other exotic pictures.
I'm curious to know why one so beautiful, so young, should marry the ruthless Khan.
I shall be queen in Baghdad.
After she married the French actor Jean-Pierre Aumont, she moved to Paris. So when I went to Paris last year, I made a point to visit her grave. Unfortunately, she died when she was 31 or 39, depending on which source you use. And she had a heart attack and she drowned in her bath. Now, her films are campy, but they're wonderful for children. And the Technicolor is beautiful.
No, he must not.
And she was
He must
beautiful
not
as well.
They will kill him.
I, a lowly merchant, do plead with the mighty Khan for the privilege of adding my humble offerings to those of his noble guest.
This merchant from Basra is Ali Baba.
And now as an adult, I also realized the beauty of how diverse the cast was in her films. Her co-stars included Sabu, an East Indian actor, the Hawaiian actor Al Kukumi, Thomas Gomez was a staple, Turhan Bey, who was part Turkish, and also Jenny Lagon, a black actress and dancer, who is still with us today, and you can YouTube her tap dancing at the age of 92. I do want to mention the Mexican singer, dancer, and actress Armida, I don't know how it's pronounced. She was able to sustain herself in movies from the late 1920s through the 1950s, although she mainly had bit parts, or they were specialty acts as a dancer or singer. The Girl from Monterey in 1943 was one of her few leading roles. And last but not least, one of the most talented actresses to have ever graced the silver screen, Katy Jurado. Her former husband, Ernest Borgnine, described her as beautiful but a tiger. And although she too played stereotypical Latina roles, she managed to give them strength and dignity in her performances. I fell in love with her character, Cello, in Bullfighter and the Lady, starring Robert Stack. It was her first English language film, and she delivered her lines phonetically. But you wouldn't have noticed her lack of English skills. Her most well-known role is Helen Ramirez in High Noon, and it earned her a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress. She was Oscar nominated for Best Supporting Actress in Broken Lance, but unfortunately she didn't win. And you may have seen her in other films like Badlanders, One-Eyed Jacks, Barabbas, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, and if you're a Luis Buñuel fan, his Mexican film El Bruto. She juggled a career between Mexico and the U.S., but towards the latter decade of her life, she appeared mainly in Mexican productions. Well, thank you for joining me for this quick overview of Latina actresses before Rita Moreno. Soon I'll be working on the Latino men, like Ramon Navarro, Leo Carrillo, and Pedro Gonzalez, for example. So stay tuned.